Honestly, I think this is one of the better news stories that I've heard in a long time, man, because if you know anything about this kind of subject, you kind of realize just how bad that it really is, and a lot of people don't really know that much about it. And so, like, they're completely unaware that, like, there's this big problem going on, especially here in the United States. And it's kind of sad because, like, a lot of those people who don't even know that this is a problem are the same families that are affected by people who eventually get addicted to things like this and have their lives derailed or, end up dead from an overdose somewhere or something like that, man. So they don't even really know that this kind of problem is pretty much legally happening, at least, well, up until this. And then, like, their families are the ones who get affected by this kind of thing. Now, I live in the Rust Belt, okay, in the United States, and throughout, like, the severe economic decline of the last few decades from manufacturing jobs kind of drying up here in the United States, there's been a pretty significant rise in, like, poverty rates, crime, and especially in opioid drug use. So during my childhood, going around, like, you just noticed this kind of thing. I mean, like, I remember going to a gas station with my dad, right? And this guy over in the vehicle next to us is just nodded off in his seat of his car, like in the driver's seat, dude. I've seen people overdose in Walmart parking lots, and it's even gotten so bad that even at, like, welfare offices, people were overdosing on, like, fentanyl and things like that. So there was a pretty big opioid epidemic going on in the United States, especially over, like, the last decade or so. It got to the point where, like I said, in communities like mine, dude, it was just an unavoidable part of life. So I think maybe that's why this one kind of hits so close to home for me, but one of the main contributors to the opioid epidemic, like, I don't know why I have trouble saying that, but the opioid epidemic has actually been charged federally and will have to pay billions of dollars towards opioid treatment and abatement programs, and also will close their company's doors. So the company in question is Purdue Pharma. They are actually the manufacturers of OxyContin, which OxyContin is an opioid that actually, it's a controlled substance, but it's actually used, like, legitimately. It's used by doctors and things to help treat pain. And there's actually different opioids that are legal to use. They're usually painkillers and things like that, but a really big problem that was happening in the United States that really contributed to this is the fact that, doctors would prescribe these things to treat people's pain and other issues that were going on, okay? And the problem with them is that they're extremely addictive. Like, the addiction rate for these kinds of medications is ridiculously high. Like, you can become dependent on them after what you would think would be, like, moderate usage, right? Like, under, like, a medical kind of supervision. But then, after the medication's done, the pain has subsided or whatever, you're addicted to fucking opioids. Now that happens, right? People get addicted to medications and things like that. It sucks, but it does happen, right? Well, the problem with that is that this company the whole time knew that this was an issue going on, knew that the country was trying to control opioid usage, and they were, like, actively thwarting those efforts and trying to dodge them in order just to simply make profit. Now, this video, trust me, is not to deride the usage of opioids if they're legitimate. Like, if you really do need painkillers and things like that, there are really legitimate uses for it. But a huge issue going on was that this company, was basically trying to get doctors to overprescribe the medication, and they were pushing these painkillers and these opioids on the American public so fucking hard that it was causing, like, a spike in addiction rates. And the only reason that they would do that is simply for profit. And that's, I would say, a bigger point about the entire medical industry in the United States. In all reality, the US is probably the only country in Western society that has a for-profit medical system, and so shit like this generally goes either unnoticed or not cared about enough to actually have something done about it, which is why this even became such a problem in the first place. Now, there were 3 federal charges pressed against Purdue Pharma, and the company filed for bankruptcy in 2019, but they just pleaded guilty to violating federal anti-kickback laws. And basically what this means is there's federal laws in place that are supposed to prevent, like, medicine manufacturers from going to a doctor and saying, hey, if you prescribe more of our medication, we'll pay you in some way, right? Basically, medicine companies try to bribe doctors and do successfully bribe doctors into prescribing a shit ton of their medication for monetary value, right? Because, in the end of it, it's a win-win for both of those people. The medicine company obviously is selling a shit ton more medicine because they got the doctors on board, which means more profit for them. But then the doctor also is getting a kickback, right? He's prescribing more of this medication and, maybe he gets a trip to Jamaica, or maybe he gets a $50,000 check every year or something like that, And so when this was happening, doctors were overprescribing these medications like OxyContin, and it was causing opioid addiction spikes. It was causing people to eventually get off of it and be like, God damn, I feel like I really need that. And then unfortunately in the streets, the best alternative, which, it really isn't the best alternative, but the best alternative that they can get their hands on to fuel that addiction is generally things like heroin, which are like laced with fentanyl and things like that. And then, they overdose and they die, or they constantly have a spiraling addiction problem that needs to be addressed, but, they don't really have the ability to address it very well because obviously they're fucking addicted, and it's very hard to just be like, oh yeah, I've got an addiction to this problem. So this company very significantly contributed to the problem in our country that killed just countless people, it seems like, and destroyed communities like the one that I live in. So Purdue Pharma did not have the $8 billion to pay in fines right up front. So the company is basically being dissolved, okay? And all of the assets of the company are going to be used to create what is called a new public benefit company, which is controlled usually by a trust or some sort of entity like that, basically for the benefit of the American public. Now, the Justice Department is saying that it's not going to be used to maximize profits, and that it's going to function for public interest, but I mean, let's be honest, it's hard to trust the government. Future earnings for the company will go to paying the fines and penalties and, that $8 billion, whatever's left over of that, it's going to go to pay those off, and then that will in turn be used to combat the opioid crisis in our country. Now, the thing is it's not all sunshine and rainbows, it's not like, oh, OxyContin's disappearing, people aren't going to get addicted. As a matter of fact, this new company will produce painkillers like OxyContin, but they're also apparently going to be developing drugs to deal with opioid overdoses, and on top of that, they also will be making life-saving overdose rescue drugs, medically assisted treatment medications, and these are going to apparently be available at like steep discounts to communities that are dealing with the opioid crisis. Now, Ohio, which is where I live, was one of the hardest hit states, if not basically the hardest hit. It was pretty bad here by this entire epidemic, so apparently this company is probably going to be doing a lot of work around here, so on top of that, the Justice Department reached a separate $225 million civil settlement with the former owners of Purdue Pharma, which is called the Sackler family. And on top of that, though, this family and other former and current employees and whatnot of the company do still face the possibility that there will be federal criminal charges against them as well, because at the end of the day, these people knew what the fuck they were doing, and they only did it simply for profit. They didn't care that people were dying in the streets. They didn't care that families were being ruined and that people's lives were being destroyed by what they were doing. As long as the numbers were going up, that's all they gave a shit about. And at the end of the day, the Sackler family and the owners and the high-end employees, they were getting bonuses. In a lot of these major corporations, you get performance bonuses, right? So, if a CEO steps into a company and profits go up 300% that year, a lot of their contracts are set up basically to give them these fucking insane bonuses worth sometimes tens of millions of dollars, simply for what is supposed to be doing a good job. But in situations like this, the argument obviously can be made. It's like, well, were you doing a good job? Maybe in a business sense, yeah, because you were selling like a shit ton of medicine, but the damage that you were doing to the society around you was absolutely against that money value. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was ridiculous how much this has really hurt so many different people. So, and the reality is, the medicine industry in the United States is just fucking terrible, dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, the more that you look into big pharma in the United States, and I know I'm gonna sound like a wacko conspiracy theorist here, but I'm really not. The more that you look into situations like this, and the more that you look at the pharmaceutical companies in this country, you realize very quickly, number one, how much power that they have over society, and number two, the shady shit that they do with that. Tens of thousands of Americans are dying from overdose deaths involving opioids every single year. In 2017, the number pushed almost 50,000, okay? That's insane, right? That's a insane amount of people dying from an issue like this. And a lot of it, if not basically the full responsibility, comes back to the pharmaceutical industry. And people like this and companies like this. They have killed, throughout this entire time, hundreds of thousands of Americans. They have ruined the lives of probably millions of Americans because of all of the effects that, drug use can have on people and their families and significant others and whatnot. They've destroyed some of the economic output of a lot of communities because people can't go to work and keep a solid job a lot of the time when they're addicted to opioids because they overdose and things like that, or they just, have issues going on surrounding that drug usage and whatnot. So they have that power. And then like the medication that they make that people depend on is significantly overpriced. Don't get me wrong, I understand research and development, you have to have a profit with these companies so that they can afford to do things like that, and the cost of that is astronomical, but I'm sorry, you simply can't explain to me logically, right? Why an EpiPen, which is used to save people's lives during something that they cannot control, costs about maybe $30 to manufacture, but yet retails at over $600 fucking dollars. There is no reason that that should even be something that happens, especially in a first world country. The fact that people have to choose between taking life-saving medication and being able to pay their fucking bills and have food is ridiculous. Like, it does not logically make sense, and I think most, if not everyone, can agree with that. So seeing a situation like this feels like a huge victory, even if at the end of the day, there is still risk, right? They're still making these medications. Who really knows what's gonna happen out of this entire thing? But I definitely hope for the best, and I like to see these fucking scumbags fall on their face at some point, so with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at SubToOptimus, make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. Thank you to my channel members, your support helps my channel tremendously, and until my next video guys, this is Optimus, well, just really happy to hear this, and signing out.